Okay, I will call this work session of the Pawtucket School Committee to order at 6:37. Ms. List, will you please take a roll call?
Mr. Charbonneau.
Here.
Ms. Grant.
Here.
Mr. Knight.
Here.
Mr. Marino.
Here.
Ms. Doobie.
Here. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item on our agenda is public participation. I see no one signed up. So we'll move on to our second item, recognition.
Yes, good
Dr.
evening,
Glass.
everyone. It is a pleasure for me to share what I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to ask Dr. Ash to come up, and I'm going to ask a Shea student athlete to come up, Anthony J. Cox, with his family. So while you're making your way up, I'll make some comments. Come up, don't be shy. So a few weeks ago on a weekend, it was a Saturday afternoon, and checking my email, you can go right over towards Dr. Ash, checking my email, and I received an email from a parent who had said that she had gone to a game with Shea versus Burrillville, and she was so impressed. Athletic Director Dina, would you also come up? So impressed with a student at this game, and this was a parent of at the opposing team from Burrillville. And she went on to talk about how this student had come to the concession stand and was just so polite and talking to the younger students, and just was very moved by that, but then was even so moved after that at the end of the game. And I'll let Dr. Ash share a little bit about this, but that was one email. And then an hour or two later, I received another email from the coach. And then an hour or two later, it was like I received another email from a parent talking about this Shea athlete, all the Shea athletes, but this particular one, number 3, was his jersey, and he stood out. So Anthony J. Cox, we are here to recognize you this evening for who you are as a person, because you extended yourself and showed such character, integrity, and kindness that you had an impact on several people just that one day of how you acted. So you're an example of, what our students in Pawtucket, and we want to say thank you for being a great representative of Pawtucket. And I'm going to ask Dr. Ash to share a little bit more.
Thank you, Dr. McWilliams. Madam Chair, members of the school committee. What I'd like to do is, and that was exactly right what Dr. McWilliams said, we received many emails after a tough loss to Burrillville on that Friday night. And I just want to read just a little snippet of one of the emails. And it says, after the game, while everyone was exiting, the Burrillville band director was wheeling a disabled band member down to the parking lot. It is a steep entry exit leading to the field, and she was walking backwards, navigating pine needles. While so many parents and students and fans just walked right by, when I saw number 3 on your football team stop and ask politely, ma'am, do you need help? He did this after a long game and a loss. It speaks volumes for that young man, and it certainly does. Now, Anthony, I want to share something with you. Anthony is currently a senior. Anthony has been at Shea for 4 years. When I spoke to Anthony last week, I said to Anthony, I congratulated him on what he did. And, he said to me, Dr. Ash, he said, it's taken me a while to mature. He said, but I think I'm on the road of maturity, right? And you said that to me, but I want to tell you something, that you are. But I want it very, very clear that even though Anthony, like many students, it takes a while to mature, the one thing, Anthony, that you've always had, and it lives with you, is this right here. Your heart, Anthony's heart, is full of gold. Anthony is compassionate, empathetic, and he's just full of kindness. And that's the man that you are, Anthony. And we're very proud to have you at Shea and to be a member of our football team and also to be a member of the Shea community. So for that, Anthony, I thank you. And that goes a long way too, because Anthony wouldn't be that way without, come on. These are Anthony's grandparents, Mr. and Mrs. J. Cox. Thank you. And Anthony has a huge support system. We love him to death. Another support for him is his sister. Where are you guys? Right? Sister and brother. As well as he has a lot of fans for teachers, Mrs. Ronayne, Mrs. McCahey, and Coach Camp. And I don't know, Coach Camp, do you want to say a couple words? Okay.
Dr. Williams, school committee, thank you for having me. I just want to say, Anthony, thank you for allowing me to be part of your life for the last 4 years. He's been a true joy, and most impressive thing about Anthony is how myself and the other coaches in our school family has seen Anthony grow from this young ninth grader to this beautiful, handsome, mature young man that you see right here in front of you. When Dr. McWilliams shared that email with us, it was Sunday morning, because we played on Saturday afternoon. It did not surprise me that number 3, Anthony, was the man that did this, because he is a leader on our team. When it comes to practice, he's just a joy to be around, and it's been a joy. And I want to thank you, and Mr. and Mrs. Jaycox, I want to thank you, because you're the reason why he is this man. You know, I was just sharing with our teacher, if there's a heaven, I believe there is, you guys will be there, because you are a light in my life, because I've been with you, not only with Anthony, but you are the children, and I thank you for supporting me and supporting the children. Anthony, thank you. Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
School Department and School Committee, we award Anthony Jaycox this recognition and appreciation of your thoughtfulness in demonstrating outstanding behavior. You have made Pawtucket proud. Congratulations. So come.
And Anthony, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words.
I just want to thank my grandparents for taking me in and raising me the way they did. And I also want to thank Miss Ronayne, Ms. McCahey, Coach Camp, because without the group of supporters that I have today, I would not be the man that I am. They built me to be who I am. They helped me along the way. So I can't just take credit for that myself. And with my grandparents, they also helped me a very long way.
Thank you, Anthony. Your statement right there just echoes everything that we heard about how mature of a young man you are, and we wish you all the best. Mr. Charbonneau.
Anthony, come back up to the podium for a minute if you would. We're not quite done yet. Let me just say how proud I am as a member of this committee to read the email I read about a student in our district. It's amazing to me when I read and I pictured in my head the countless people that walked by, you know, because it's easier to walk by, stopping and offering assistance, particularly after a tough loss at an away game. You know, I was moved reading the email. I sent Dr. Ash an email. I believe she shared it with you. I wanted to publicly thank you and recognize your grandparents, your brothers and sisters. You have a terrific role model right in front of you here. Watch what your older brother has done and mimic his actions. And to your grandparents, you've raised one hell of a kid. And one hell of a young man, and he's a credit, as I said in the email, to his family and to this district. So well done, Anthony. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Anthony. Next up on the agenda, we have presentation.
Yeah, so it brings me great pleasure to introduce our Director of MLL, Ms. Karen Stern. And Karen, are you presenting alone or with someone, or?
Yes, I'm actually presenting alone. As Dr. Williams said, I'm the Director of MLL Services, Karen Stern. I did this presentation with my coordinator, Daniel Silva, but he as you may know, is the coach of Tolman Soccer. And so because of the electricity that was out, his game from, I think it was versus Hendricken is tonight. So I'm going solo, but we did this together just to give credit where credit is due.
So I wanted to just say a few words that we appreciate your leadership for our whole district and making sure that our MLLs have everything that they need. And as she gives this presentation overview, you will see the work that they have been doing over the past several years.
Thank you, Dr. McWilliams. So this is a presentation, and school committee, I'm honored to present to you. I think this is the first time that I've presented and been in front of the school committee, maybe even since I was given this position in 2013. So I do appreciate the opportunity. This is an initial kind of overview of our department and what we do. So, I thought it would be nice to start talking about, we have so much jargon, and I wanted you to understand what MLL is versus EL. So RIDE uses the term MLL, multilingual learners, to refer to the same group of students as English learners. English learners is the federal usage, but RIDE term is to use to come to Rhode Island schools, multilingual learners as opposed to English learners. I did, in my presentation, there's actually a link to RIDE because RIDE has recently come out with an MLL blueprint talking about the supports and services that the MLLs in the state will and should receive. Okay, at the bottom of the slide, I said, did you know multilingual students include all students who speak a language other than English at home? Approximately 1 in 5 children in the US fall into this category. Among our multilingual students, one subgroup is the English learners who are not yet proficient in English. That's about 1 in 10 students in the US are classified as English learners, so 10%. And what I wanted you to know is in Pawtucket, we have about 16% multilingual learners. Next slide. Okay, so I thought it would be interesting for you to see the variety of languages that our multilingual learners speak and the countries that our Pawtucket MLLs come from. So we have approximately 1,374 students who are active MLLs. It's actually, as of today, 1,384 because we are constantly doing and processing registrations, and so our numbers grow. And what I mean by active multilingual learners is they are qualifying receiving services from us. 722 of these students are Spanish speakers, which if you're a mathematician, you see that's over 50%. And interestingly, in the United States, about 50% of the population are Spanish speakers. So it's very reflective of that. Our next biggest population is Portuguese Creole speakers. We have 453. And if you're looking at the Spanish and the Portuguese, then it'll be no surprise to you that my office interprets and translates all district missives, many things that come from the city, as well as what comes from the school department into Spanish and Portuguese. You see that on our website. You hear that in the phone calls home. And just as a interesting fact, 213 of our MLL students, which is approximately 15%, are what is known as dually identified. So they're MLLs and they have IEPs. So they're receiving both services in our district. I went through and looked at our census, and our Pawtucket MLLs, I've made a whole list of you can see it's all over the world and the continents. But what I find most interesting is that 42% of our MLLs are born in the United States. So I think you're well served to know that while we do have many students we have a huge Cape Verdean population, we have many Latino students, Mexico, Puerto Rico, which is obviously also considered part of the United States, and many other countries. But I think it's just interesting to know that the United States fact. So, okay, next slide. So I wanted to do a snapshot for you of our Pawtucket MLLs in the elementary schools and in the secondary schools. So as you know, there are 10 elementary schools. I made a list of the number of active MLLs in each school, as well as the number of MLL teachers that we have. So you can see from this, our biggest populations, it'll be no surprise to you, Baldwin and Cunningham are the two biggest. However, we have growing populations at every school. So 70 at Winters, you can go down the list. Curvin has 58, etc. Fallon is 59. But what I want you to know is that we serve MLLs at every school, home schools. So students can we're also at home schools for that. And at Shea and Tolman, we do have more at Shea, but honestly, not significantly more. And we were able this year, we now have home schools for Tolman and Shea. We've been able to increase the certified teachers, and we can service students again at their home schools. So you can see the total number of active MLLs in secondary, 707, and we have 67 MLL teachers. And that's really just the teachers who are servicing MLLs, because we have additional certified staff at those buildings, but they're teaching in other areas. Okay, the next slide. So in addition to the grade level curricula that we offer with supports and scaffolds, so MLLs do have, are exposed to high quality grade level curricula, our SAVIS and so forth. We also have MLL specific targeted interventions at the elementary and the middle school level. For elementary students, the MLL students in the entering and emerging stages of English language proficiency, so that's like level 1 and 2 students. In grades K to 5, we're using Imagine Learning to help accelerate their reading and language proficiency. We have approximately 275 users of this program. And this program has instruction in the 4 domains of literacy: the listening, reading, speaking, and writing. And it has native language support in 15 languages, most of our biggest ones. And the Imagine Learning is something that can be done in the elementary school classroom, but it may also be done during intervention periods with one of the MLL support teachers. Next slide. For the middle school, our intervention is Achieve 3000. We have approximately 150 users of the program. It's available to the MLL students in the entering, emerging, and developing sort of levels 1 through 3. It gives online differentiated instruction for improving literacy for all of our learners, and it has embedded assessment and Lexiles. So I hope that I realize this is a very high level overview of MLL services. So, I think that in the future, other presentations might get more into some other specifics, but I do appreciate the chance to present, and I hope that it's given you kind of a window into MLL in Pawtucket. Thank you very much.
You. I'm just looking for my committee members' questions, Ms. Stern. Sorry, I have a few. Ms. Grant, and then Mr. Moreno, and then Mr. Charbonneau. Ms. Grant.
I noticed I think on the second page that we have quite a diverse community. How do we, besides, I know you had mentioned there are some groups, like we have a large Latino, Cape Verdean. How do we communicate or make sure that the parents of the smaller languages, how do we get them the information and explain it? Is it through the same way? Like I noticed through the robocalls and things like that, it's usually English, then it might be like a Spanish. How would something be transmitted to a parent of maybe Russian, maybe someone from the Ukraine or something like that?
That's a good question. So I can answer how it's done in our communication, like the written communication, and then I'm going to ask Hirsch maybe to be able to comment because he usually does the robocalls. He may know a little bit more than I do about beyond those languages. In terms of what happens at the schools, we have 3 district translators, 2 Spanish and 1 Portuguese, because those are our, half are Spanish speakers, the next third are Portuguese, Creole. Those are our biggest languages. And then we go down with, I had originally, like you said, Russian. I think there may be 2. There's 14 Arabic. So we have smaller, those are our biggest. But when teachers send home something, they can get it translated into Portuguese and Spanish. And beyond that, honestly, they use programs like Google Translate. It may not be perfect. Depends on what it is. If it's like a document that's coming from RIDE, on their website, they have, maybe the 10 or 15 most widely spoken within the state. So if it's something once we have our state testing, our access testing in January, all of those documents are available through RIDE in Arabic, Chinese, or the bigger. But when teachers want to translate, they will ask us to do Portuguese and Spanish, but they will also use Google Translate. And I believe the new Kinvolved has some capacity to do also translations. But it's an ongoing thought to be thinking about once we have a growing population, how do we get something translated? So, but the teachers are really good about doing their best to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, that'd be great.
So this year we implemented Kinvolved for the teachers, and we're expanding that to the support staff in the building as well. That does have the ability to translate into 80 different languages. So where teachers are using it, starting to use it to communicate with parents back and forth to replace some of the communication methods that are there. And so that's one of the ways that it's helping with communication back and forth. And it's a 2-way communication system, so if they get a text or an email, if they don't have a text, and they can reply back to the classroom teacher. So we're seeing, and we're kind of expanding that in phases. We just had a meeting actually today with the superintendent about expanding that out to other teachers in the building, such as math interventionists and reading interventionists and clerks and principals starting to use it, and the other people.
So if we had a robocall that went out, would these specific families, knowing that they don't speak English or Spanish,
would something different, a text or maybe something go out so they could also,
Yeah,
feel that
that-
they can
that is
incorporate
the issue.
information.
that we have, right now, Instagram with Info, it's that's what we're still using Skylar, which is the school messenger, for the robocall. We're going to start trying to do the Info for some messages as well.
Okay.
The nice thing that within Skyward, what happens is each of the parents that's part of the family, when they register, they tell us what their home language is. So you could have two parents, and the mom may get it in what a language they could get it in Creole or Haitian, and then the dad could get it in English, and vice versa. So it has that nice ability to go out to the different language each parent. We haven't made the kind of the leap yet to go and try to do all that, because it is kind of new and they're still kind of learning it for the first time. But unfortunately, one of the things, School Messenger, it is limited to, right now it's going out in English, Portuguese, Spanish, and Polish for those goods. And they keep adding to the languages too, so we kind of keep checking every so often, say, hey, have you added a new language and stuff. And that's why my messages now, I don't record my voice so much anymore because I use the automatic cut, so it can get the other languages out there. Before it was kind of just going out in English, and I know the committee here had asked, hey, can we hit the other languages that are out there? That's great, because we're getting more parents.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Moreno?
So, the only question I had, I saw how Tolman and Tolman and Slater have almost an equal amount of MLL students. And Tolman has about half of the teachers that Slater has, and so I'm just curious if you had any issues with coverage of the classrooms or anything like that.
So I understand that you're saying that because you were looking at Slater and Tolman, they have almost the same number of active MLLs, and you're wondering why Slater has more MLL teachers as opposed to Tolman. I mean, part of it has to do with we are building our program at Tolman, so you can see between Tolman and Shea, we now have 8 MLL teachers at Tolman and 16 at Shea. So one of the nice things that we've been doing in the district is as we hire new teachers, many of them are required to get an MLL certificate. And that's the way the commissioner's going. That's the way the state is going, to really being able to build capacity. But we do have at Slater, I mean, the Slater is honestly in the middle schools function more as teams. So they have like their team of MLL students versus, let's say, for example, at Tolman, there are 8 teachers, but there might be some students who are upper level MLLs who are just with an ELA teacher. And one of the things that we've done new this year with Dr. McWilliams' support is We have an MLL support teacher split between Tolman and Shea, which we've never had before. We've had the support teachers at the elementary. We expanded it to middle, and now we have a half and half time to provide additional targeted support to our levels 1 and 2 students. So, I guess you can look at the data many ways, and I thank you for pointing that out to me, because that I never thought of it like that. I always think of the middle school's comparison and the high school's comparison, and not just necessarily the teachers. And I think the other thing that my numbers maybe don't reflect is that at Tolman and at Shea, we do have additional certified teachers who may not be teaching who may be teaching the students, but maybe not at the sheltered level 1 and 2, might have upper level students. So, but I appreciate that feedback, and I'll keep it in mind as I'm doing future presentations, because it's obviously clear to me because it's my department. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Mr. Charbonneau?
Yeah, I think Mr. Marino asked part of my question, but the numbers of students and staff per school seem to kind of be all over the board. So is there not a ratio of we need X amount of MLL certified teachers per MLL students, or is it not just like a 10 to 1, a 5 to 1?
Yeah, it's you may have, depending on the schools, let's say you may have a class, like for example, you might have some of the classes, let's say, I'll take for example at Shea, you might have some classes where the upper level MLLs are mixed in with mainstream students, because they have the mainstream students as role models. We have MLL certified teachers teaching those classes. So it's not necessarily a one-to-one. It has to do with having the certified teachers teaching the class. And we're, the more capacity that we have, like for example, if you look at Shea versus Tolman, we're building up at Tolman so that we're able to support even more classes. But everyone who's at the reason we were able to this year, in the past, we used to send level 1 and 2 students to Shea. So they were going across the city. We weren't able to support it. We now have enough teachers so that those students who are levels 1 and 2 and need MLL teachers throughout the day, we have enough at Tolman now to do that as well.
Okay,
So-
and a couple more things, Dr.
Sure.
Williams. So the number of, I understand that teachers are on their own getting their L certificate, but the number of teachers we saw up here are all actively teaching
Yes.
MLL
Correct.
students.
Yes.
Okay.
And so thank you for that, because so in other words, there are other teachers, let's say, for example, at Shea, who hold the certificate, but aren't necessarily actively teaching the MLLs at this point. So I didn't put them in my data. So I do have other teachers. So it's the more teachers that we have, the better capacity it is for us, the more we can support MLLs and advanced classes and all those sorts of things. So I'm just happy that, Goff this year, you don't see this in the numbers either, but we were able to do separate 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade MLL teams. So the more that we continue with building the capacity, having kids at home schools, we're able to service them. And I mean, maybe in a future presentation, I can show you the difference between the levels of MLL services and how much support they need today, because this isn't reflective of it. This just tells you how many kids are receiving services, how many teachers are teaching them, but there's quite a variety between, I referenced levels 1 and 2, beginning, entering, and your level 3, 4, and 5 year exited. So,
Okay, and last question, in your opinion, is 3 translators enough for a district our size? It seems like the number should be triple that. If
okay, and what I would say is that and Dr. McWilliams knows this, and it's always budgetary issues, but we have 2 Spanish, we need a second Portuguese. However, with that being said, so our 2 Spanish translators, we have one that is just assigned to special education. So she does all the IEPs and those meetings. So I have 2. The one Portuguese is tough, but the caveat with that is that our Portuguese interpreter left maybe 2 weeks ago, took a position at BV Prep, like for a beginning teacher. So we are actively looking, and it's quite difficult to find. What we need is someone, there are many, many Creole speakers, but we need someone who is literate in Portuguese to be able to not just do the interpretation, but the translations. So we're looking for our Portuguese. In a perfect world, do I think we need more? Yes. So it's, and it's always interesting. There are growing needs. I have a growing need for Arabic, and we've talked about with Assistant Superintendent Rabbit, we've talked about, do we start using some translation services for that? So the Spanish, my 2 Spanish interpreters are busy all the time. And I would love to have a second Portuguese. I mean, I'm sure if I had a third Spanish, they would be utilized. We have definitely big needs, and my interpreters are fabulous. They work very hard.
I just wonder if there's not an opportunity on a per school basis to look within the school community for a parent who may be willing to serve as the Portuguese interpreter for Baldwin, and something that we would come up with some type of stipend for. But I think if we have 3 translators in there about the district, we may be missing more people from no fault of anybody's, but just missing more people and more connections. And it seems like we may be able to get that connection if we drilled it down to the individual school and sought parent involvement.
And I think that's a fabulous idea. And just as a kind of a side to that, when we have open houses, for example, there is no way my 3 translators, interpreters could go to all of them. So we do utilize the TAs. And sometimes, there are many TAs who speak Spanish or speak Creole, Portuguese Creole, and we use them for that purpose. So I agree with you. That would be lovely to have some stipends to have that piece. We'd still need the literate for the written, but I think that would help a lot with the meetings, the parent meetings. Mike can't go to every one, and I think we do have some capacity there. So if you have the funding, I think you could utilize. There are a lot of lovely TAs that speak Spanish and Portuguese Creole, and we use them for, the SEAC night, and we use them for open houses. So that's definitely, I think, good thinking. And in terms of the missives that are translated, it would still be lovely to have another Portuguese, but we have to find. It's on Indeed and School Spring for our Portuguese. So we are actively looking.
Thank you, Ms. Stern.
Thank you.
I'm good. Thank you.
Yes, I was just going to say, first of all, thank you. And what Karen did do is bring an overview at a higher level, but you had mentioned it, Mr. Charbonneau, that I think what some of a future presentation would be good would be getting down to that little bit of detail of the actual levels, because I think that could answer some of those questions as far as staffing, because the levels of a student where they are in either 1, 2, 3, or 4 would correlate to the staffing.
I think you're
Yes.
right, Dr. McWilliams. And as we move forward and as we come toward access testing, which is basically January throughout the state, January to mid-February, it's important to understand the English language development and the proficiency levels. And I'd be happy to come back and do an access presentation and explain that to you. And just as a kudos to our principals and our staff, last year in Access, if you look at the statewide data, our participation was excellent, which is honestly amazing considering we were in a pandemic. The principals went to bat, the teachers, to motivate the kids, even if they were distance learning, they came in for access. So, that was something to be glad about. So I will, but if invite me again, I'll be delighted to come back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stern. Our next item is approval of previous meeting minutes 10/5/21 and 10/12/21. Been a motion to approve the minutes by Mr. Moreno. It's been seconded by Ms. Grant. Any discussion? Melissa, you take a roll call?
Mr. Charbonneau.
Yes.
Ms. Grant. Mr. Knight.
Yes.
Mr. Marino.
Yes.
Ms. Doobie.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously. Our next item is executive session. A vote to recess to executive session in accordance with the provisions under Rhode Island General Laws, Rhode Island General Law 42-46-5A3, security including but not limited to the deployment of security personnel or devices for the purpose of discussing and/or acting upon review of safety plans, seal executive session minutes, and adjourn executive session.
Second.
On a motion to move to executive session by Mr. Charbonneau. It's been seconded by Ms. Grant. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We will now be in executive session.
Didn't want everybody confused, huh?
Just let me know when you're ready, okay? All right. Oh, you are? Yes. Okay. Well, we convened to open session at 8:04. Mr. Susan, take a roll call.
Mr. Charbonneau.
Here.
Ms. Grant.
Here.
Mr. Knight.
Yeah.
Mr. Marino.
Here.
Ms. Doobie.
Lucy, please report out the votes of the 10/28/21 executive session.
The committee voted unanimously to allow the assistant superintendents, Mrs. Ryder and Mrs. Ramsey, attend the executive session, to seal the executive session minutes, and to adjourn the executive session.
I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. Then a motion to adjourn by Ms. Marino, then seconded by Ms. Grant. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:04.